Good evening, Cherries fans, and welcome to this latest show here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Now, of course, following that Burnley game in the FA Cup, we're back to the Premier League. With the Premier League is it from now on. So, before I welcome in my special guest ahead of this game against Brentford, a side that we know all too well, here's a bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. To find out what they can do for you, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. So, of course, we played out a 0-0 draw against Brentford at Dean Court some time ago. However, they are one of the more regular opponents that we've come up against. And to discuss all things Brentford, we have a very special guest. This special guest has worked with the likes of Sophie Ellis-Bextor, Hardfi, also is a presenter on BBC Radio London as well. He's also a solo artist and he has released his first album as well. It is a pleasure to welcome on to Up the Cherries in all departments, Billy Reeves. Good evening, Billy. How are you doing?
It's absolutely lovely to see you, Craig. I'm absolutely fine. Thank you for having me on the Punching Above Our Weight Derby podcast.
Definitely. And thank you so much for joining us. It is an absolute pleasure to talk to you. What we'll do is we'll come on to your career in a moment, but you have been a Brentford fan your entire life. How did you start supporting the club?
I guess I started around 12 when so that's 1977. So it was when the hard lads that I just joined secondary school with said, "Who do you support?" And I didn't really support anybody. I was kind of I loved that. I loved the fact that I just liked anybody that beat Leeds because it was the early 70s. But so I went with all the tough guys because it was it's my nearest club. So it's a short train journey away. Obviously, didn't tell my parents where I was going. So that's essentially why I support Brentford, because I'm kind of supposed to. I live in Staines, so they're the nearest team basically. But everybody in those days was Chelsea fans really. But I didn't really start going in earnest until I came back from university back to the area, because I think you get nostalgic for when you were 8. When you get into your 20s and 30s. So I only really started going in earnest in the late 80s, early 90s, really, and it was really, it was really grim. Relegation battles, bouncing between the third and the fourth division was Brentford's kind of like normal place to be. But then Martin Allen really, really excited everybody. That got everything sort of like back on track really. And then I started working, doing it, covering games for work for BBC Radio London. And again, that was by accident. That was started with Wally Downs. And then I started doing it every season, really, from when Andy Scott took over from Terry Butcher. So I've been on that journey. When I started covering games, Brentford were 15th in the 4th division. And I've covered games right up until the promotion to the Premier League. So yeah, it's more of a recent thing. I guess it's a little bit like Bournemouth. Brentford's history really is a recent history.
Yeah, and likewise, we've been there, done that, got the
Mm,
t-shirt. -17, of course, we had the
yeah,
Winter Gardens where we nearly went out of existence,
yeah,
and the fans had to pull together. So,
yeah,
yes, we can feel the story, and
yeah,
we're two very similar clubs.
yeah.
In your journey supporting Brentford from those dark days in League Two to the Premier League, what were the highest and lowest moments?
That's a really good question. There was loads of there were very few highlights. There was a little bit of a cup run. Brentford had a cup run in the League Cup, beating Hull City and Everton around that time under Andy Scott. David Moyes, being a very bad loser afterwards, accused the fans of slinging and I quote, an empty bottle at one of his players. That was probably Martin Allen, as mentioned. He was part coach, part showman. There was a defeat of Premier League Sunderland around them, but it was mainly scrapping around in the mud. But after that, after Matthew Benham took over the ownership of the club, for the ceremonial pound, it was pretty much happy days thereafter. Andy Scott was fired, which was a bit of a low point just before Brentford played in the JPT final, which was a little bit of a shame. I think that was a little bit rum, but apart from that, it's been happy days recently. But if you go back before that, it was just all grim the whole time. So I don't think you ever, and bucket shaking and all the rest of it. And I don't think I was kind of old enough or enough of a kind of like passionate fan to realise just how close Brentford were to going out of business and what that would have meant.
And of course, you mentioned there one name, Martin Allen,
Mm.
who revitalised the club, and he's known as Mad Dog, isn't he?
Yeah, that's because he didn't really revitalise the club. He kind of got people coming back again,
Yeah.
because he was just, it was just sort of like joy after Leroy Rossini and Wally Downs were kind of like it was so sort of like bang average. Certainly the club was still really struggling, without sort of loans and not speaking to the taxman really, when you should have done. That's what really kept the club going rather than Martin Allen. But he's known as Mad Dog because when he played for West Ham, when he ran, little sort of like white bits of spittle would appear on either side of his head. But I tell you what, he doesn't like it, and I don't think you and I would like to be called Mad Dog either. He really doesn't. He's not keen. But he was a real character. He was a perfect fit for Brentford as well. I remember covering a game at Barnsley, and it was the first time I'd been to Barnsley. It's quite a nice little place, and I was at top at town where the shops are because I'd arrived so early, and with a couple of speaking to a couple of fans, and he just came up the hill looking for a place where he could buy a cigar. Because I said, aren't you going to be speaking? He said, no. He said, there's no point in sort of talking to players just before they go out. I've told them everything they know. So yeah, I've gone for a walk. There was so many extraordinary things like that. I saw him. I covered a game when he was managing Notts County, and again I was there. I was at the ground, Meadow Lane, really early, and he marched. He just started managing them. It was a third division game, League One game, and he marched that before. This is before the ground had opened, and he made a signal to the guide on the record player behind me to play the theme for The Great Escape started. And the idea is obviously he wanted to march all of his backroom staff out onto the pitch, but it was so quiet. It all sort of no, so he sort of like marched them all back again, made sort of gesticulation to turn it up. Then they all sort of like marched out again, all the players and staff, thinking, what on earth is all this about? To The Great Escape with him doing this. Then he had a work, sort of like huddled together with them to talk about tactics, and then they just did this sort of like practice session. This is an hour before the ground opens, half an hour before the ground opens. And what they've done is he had his three centre backs or three defenders across the 18-yard box, and he just kicked footballs to them, and they just kicked it as hard as they possibly could out the other end while everybody just watched. That was clearly the tactics for the day. It didn't work.
Of course, Griffin Park. We've got to
Mm,
mention it. Every away fan loves
mm,
Griffin Park.
yeah,
And I'm sure, Brentford fans love this new stadium that you've
mm.
moved into, but are you warming to it now because it's such an iconic ground?
Yeah, I think we warmed to it straight away. The fans were pretty much on board with it. The person who was sort of like most uncomfortable, or surprisingly uncomfortable, perhaps, about leaving Griffin Park was Matthew Benham, the owner. He rather felt as though we could just keep putting porter cabins in. We could put another porter cabin in for the referees. We could put seats in. We had that kind of 5-year grace period when we were in the Championship, because we got planning permission for New Griffin Park, for the GTech Community Stadium. So he was sort of saying, is there any real need? But the trouble is, of course, the fans that were running the club before Matthew took over were kind of keeping the tax man at bay. It was their idea, and they wanted an asset. Saying to Matthew, if you ever leave, then we're still saddled with paying £1 million a year to keep this from falling down. It had been given to the club by the brewery, so there was it would have been really difficult to sell for redevelopment. It's right, but as you know, it's right bang in the middle of a load of workers' cottages of people who worked at the Fuller's Brewery in the Edwardian era. So the new ground was designed as a triangular plot. So the way it's designed, the way it's fit in with the M4 one side, the railway going past the other side, the Q Road going past the other side, it really is an extraordinary edifice in such a tiny place. And although people miss Griffin Park and miss the fact that you could turn up and pay on the door, that's a world that's gone. And I think it's small enough, like the Vitality, it's kind of small enough, it's very comfortable, and most importantly, it's 1.5 miles from the old ground, so people just still drink in the same pubs, they've still got the same routines. There was a lot of consultation with the fans about how they were going to get there, because there's no parking, so encouraging people to use public transport. They have stewards all along the A4 to make sure no one gets run over. That's a bit dicey afterwards, especially at night. But everyone, and there's new pubs to enjoy around there. There's Q Strand on the green. There's Q Green. So there's still, despite the fact that Brentford no longer has a pub on each corner, there are 18 pubs within a mile, so we can't complain.
Yeah, it's not too bad, is it? Not too bad. We've got a couple. So at Dean Court. So yeah, we're quite envious of you on that front.
Yeah.
Just going back to your career, as well as your work on BBC Radio London, you've had quite a career in music. Now, do tell us a bit more about your career, which includes working with artists such as Sophie Ellis-Bextor.
Yeah, well, I'm responsible for Sophie Ellis-Bextor. I take full responsibility for TV and pop star and kitchen sink disco-like chanteurs. Yeah, I worked for after university. I worked for a little record label, Fire Records. It's still going. It's one of the oldest extant independent record labels in the country, in the world, still going. And while I was there, that's while during the period that Britpop was happening. So you had your Blur and Oasis and Pulp and all the rest of it. So suddenly Camden Town, our little indie world, became the centre of the universe. And I was a press officer, so I dealt with the radio and the press of this wee little label. And I was drinking with the boys and girls from the Melody Maker on a Tuesday, which was a regular haunt of mine. And I'd had one too many, and I said, this is ridiculous. All the major labels are signing anything, with 2 guitars and vocals and a female saying, I could do that. So Tony Judge, the art editor of the Melody Maker, bet me £100. I said I could get a record deal in a year. And that was the Tuesday. On the Wednesday, day after, Paul Mather, who was one of the people there, was an Oasis photography exhibition. So this is early '96, and Sophie was there with a couple of friends from school, and they'd swagged in. It was at the Roundhouse in Camden Town, and they'd gone through a window to get in. Sophie would have been 16, 17 at the time, and they got talking to Paul. And Paul said and then of course it sort of like transpired that the person Paul was talking to, his mother was in Blue Peter and all the rest of it. So they got to talking, and Paul said, have you ever thought about being a singer? Would you like to be in it? And she said, oh yeah, no, I'd love to do that. I've got a demo tape. And he said, well, come along tomorrow to where my friend Billy Reeves DJs, because he's forming a band, which of course I'd forgotten about. So on the Thursday, I'm DJing Highbury Corner, a little place in Highbury Corner. And Sophie came up to the DJ booth and said, "Is Paul Mather here?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Are you Billy?" And she gave me this tape. Why are you giving me this tape? And she said, "Apparently you're putting some bands together." I'm like, "Am I?" I listened to it on the car on the way home. Oh, the days of cassettes and cars. And I thought, well, she sounds, looks amazing, sounds amazing. Maybe I can put a band together. So I nicked a couple of people from bands at Fire, and I thought, well, it can be like Stereolab. It can be one note, motoric thing.
Yeah.
And it took me 7 months, 7 gigs and 7 months. And the final gig that we did before we signed was at the dear old Falcon, Camden Town. And the whole music industry was there. It was just like that. And the guy that wanted to manage us managed the Manic Street Preachers. 2 of them were there. It was extraordinary. But it was it was good fun kind of doing all of the negotiations with all the record labels, because Sophie was doing her A levels. I had to say to her mum and her stepfather, this is not going to affect, I'll do all of this. But then we sort of looked, partly because of her mother, we kind of looked a little bit more famous than we actually were. So we were signed to the same label by the same A&R guy that was working with Texas. It was when they had their kind of second wind, when they went, when they went a bit soul, didn't they? Black Eyed Boy. They were already big in Europe, but they had that kind of like renaissance. So so we went through this stage where, being this little indie band, but anything that Texas couldn't do, we got. So can Texas available for Richard and Judy? No, but we've got the new Texas. So we so we appeared to be a little bit more famous than we actually were. After the first album, I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm too old for it. Doing all the touring, Glastonbury. Oh God, I hated that. That was my last gig. Just that wasn't for me at all. But being in a massive field with up to my knees in mud, I thought, well, okay, well, I've had all the advances. We're not going to sell any more records. I'll quit. I'm sure she'll be fine. And it was our manager Martin that when Groovejet, when Rob Davis, the guy from Mud, wrote lyrics to Groovejet, that year's summer hit, 2000 summer hit, they had 35 singers came in to do vocals on it, and then Rob chose the one he liked. And Sophie didn't want to do it. It wasn't something she was into at all, that kind of thing. She's a massive fan of things like Elvis Costello, XTC, things like that. She's got very good taste in music. So you can kind of hear it in her vocal performance that it's kind of just half done. And of course, that's exactly what Rob Davis liked. He liked the fact that it was very English and half done. And, and then there was that Blur and Oasis thing with her, who was going to get to #1, wasn't it? Her or Victoria Beckham?
Yes, there was.
Amazing. So and I'm still in touch with it. The Audience album was re-released recently by the label that's putting my record out. And I went round her house. Her husband Richard, I don't know, but it turns out I've got a couple of really close mutual friends with him, because he was going to the same gigs that I was going to in the early 90s. Notably Cass Brown from the Census Things, who he plays with. So it was really nice that they invited me round in the summer. And it's very interesting to see what how they coped with COVID, what they're going to do next. Because Richard's in her band, her husband's in her band. He's the bass player of The Feeling, and The Feeling got together when they were all employed as her band. So that's how they. So The Feeling did really well as well. And it was really interesting talking to him about that. So it's kind of gone full circle, and now I'm brave enough, thanks to the record label that put the Audience album out, with me going, for a laugh, do you fancy me? And they put it out, and they're putting it out, and it's amazing to put your solo album out at the age of 57.
And it sounds really, really good. From what I've heard, you of course have got this solo album, and it's called Nostalgia of the Future.
Yeah, Nostalgia of the Future. Out now, pink vinyl or red vinyl, very reasonable, £22.
Do tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, I had some songs, some old ones that were supposed to be for Sophie, but I also I thought, do you know what I'll do? I'll be like Blondie, and I'll be an interpreter of song, and I'll have some of my friends write me songs as well, because I know so many great people. So Staines' second most famous songwriter, Rich Archer from Hardfire, gave me a song, because I needed an up-tempo one. And that's quite nice as well, because I'm hoping, like this, is that anything that he can't do, like Texas and the Audience, I'll do. They are back, though, Hardfire. They did a show, in the first show in 8 or 9 years, last year in October, which was a sellout. They were talking about doing festivals, but I think that the current plan is they're actually going to tour next year, top secret. So they're actually going to do some more shows. They're doing a stand up to cancer show at the Union Chapel in a couple of weeks. So yeah, they're blowing the dust off. He's a nice guy, Richard. He lives very near me, and of course he's a Brentford fan as well. He's the second most famous Brentford fan after me. Actually, the third most famous after Cameron Diaz and me.
And of course, Hard-Fi started off their career with stars of CCTV, didn't they?
Yeah,
And
well, they're massive album, and they recorded it all themselves in Staines. You know, they didn't have a deal. I think that they needed that had so many hit singles on it, and I think they needed to be in the charts. It was the kind of last vestiges of the charts on it, 2004, 05, 06. So by the time Killer Sounds came out, the third album, where every song on that is clearly supposed to be a hit single. But what an amazing live band! I mean, they sold the Brixton Academy out 5 nights in a row. You know, the only rock band to have ever done that. That sort of golden period for them was fantastic. But Richard's kept his eye in. He's produced records, and he's a noted producer on a kind of like Japanese indie rock scene. They had him and Wolsey, the guy that produced the Hard-Fi album. They had a little bit of success with doing sort of Hard-Fi style mixes of really young Japanese heavy metal bands by basically taking these really expensive, really beautifully recorded things, and the band would go, yeah, we want remixes, we want Hard-Fi to do it, and then just basically making them sound a lot worse. And it was those ones that people chose. So they had a couple of number ones in Japan by basically spending an afternoon making things sound terrible, making everything sort of distorted, putting Casio tone really cheap string sounds and everything. Yeah, but so he's kept his eye, and the other 3 haven't. So that's why they were so nervous, and that's why they're nervous about doing this quiet gig as well. But yeah, and of course the other top secret thing that I can now reveal, of course, there's a 4th Hard-Fi album all sitting there ready to go. So and I've heard a lot of it, and it's brilliant. It's quite bluesy and funky. So yeah, you know, 4 local heroes really.
one of my favourite bands as well of the noughties. So
yeah, your era.
Yep, definitely, definitely.
And but, you know, and big, you know, big amongst football fans. You know, they were. That's perfect. Things like Hard to Beat and stuff are all perfect for. They sound amazing in football grounds. And of course, that's how those original ska records in '69 and '70. That's how they became so big, because they were bought by, you know, music fans. That's why Chelsea come out to one of the original ska tunes. That we've lost that a little bit. You know, there's one of the most collectible football programs is the one that carries an advert for Anarchy in the UK. People would EMI advertise their music in football programs because they knew who was buying them. You know, in the same way that, of course, now the reason that football has become so massive, it's one of the only things that in an on-demand world that people are watching live on television. And of course, advertisers know who's watching it. You and me, isn't it? So all the adverts are for betting and shaving. All around the world, and yeah, so yeah, the Simpatica, and of course they were absolute regulars on Soccer AM, weren't they? Hard-Fi, you know, that they introduced the Back the Bees campaign, which, you know, was the latest in a long line of campaigns to stop Brentford going bust somehow. So yeah, and he sits, you know, we sit in the same stand. I'm great, and I've got my season ticket for the first year. He's on the other end of the row. So next season, I'm going to go back to him and say, "Can I be a bit nearer, Rich's brother, this season?" But yeah, he's a genuine football fan like me. He's local.
And of course, you worked on one of the tracks with him, Golden Days.
Yeah, he wrote me a song. What a dude.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rich.
What was it like working with him on that?
Well, I didn't. I thought what I'll do is I'll take the song and I'll go away and do it. I don't want him to have to, you know, fiddle with it with me going, Rich, can you make it a couple of BPM faster? Can you? So no, I did it. I did it with my bands, with my chums. I'm going to do another album, and there's going to be a Billy 2 album, and he's very keen to get involved in that. It depends on how busy he is with the band, and he's a family man and all the rest of it. Yeah. But I might do the other way around. I might get him to do some stuff for me, see how that works. He's got a little studio, and he's a delight. So, but I don't want to. It's difficult. I don't really want to bother him. Really, he's a professional musician, as are few of the people who play on my record are as well. But I'm very much a tire kicker, so I don't want to. Yeah, I don't really want to interrupt his work. He does this for a living, whereas I do it for fun.
Well, what I'm going to do for everybody now, you don't need to go
Yeah,
anywhere. I am going to play Golden Days for you. So play that
thanks.
track.
Thanks. The first single from my album, Nostalgia of the Future, which is out now.
Yeah.
So, of course, you did mention as well the Stand Up to Cancer gig with Hardfire as well, and that is
Yeah,
actually happening on the 6th of February.
yeah,
Um,
isn't it?
who else is going to be involved on that as well?
Yeah. This I don't. They announced it today. Richard did say. Richard mentioned to me when we had a coffee a few weeks ago that they were nervous that they were going to have to do a gig at the Union Chapel.
Mhm.
And I've done a gig. I've done a gig at the Union Chapel with one of my hobby bands. So my only advice was him don't have cymbals. Just just keep because it just disappears up in the air. I don't quite know how they're going to do it, but yeah, no, it's just that's and now I know why. But that was announced today, so I know as much about it as you do. Really, it was announced on the internet today. They're headlining some sort of 6-band indie show as part of the Stand Up to Cancer fundraising. So it shows you the sort of thing that they wouldn't have been able to do. They would have turned down. They've always been offered things like this, but it shows you that they're now accepting offers to do interesting things, which is really encouraging. They did their they did a charity gig as a warm up for their comeback gig as well in Manchester. They just suddenly appeared in Manchester at this sort of local music venue trust thing. So it shows you that despite the fact that the other three lads have got jobs, that they are kind of, yeah, the axles, if not the wheels, are turning.
Well, let's go on to the football as well.
Yes,
And of course,
bees.
Brentford doing very, very well. But Ivan Toney has been out since that nasty looking injury at the win against West Ham.
Yeah.
He could be returning, I understand, for this weekend's game. How much of a loss has he been?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, we've played 2 matches. We very rarely play without Ivan Toney, and there is a suggestion, as your viewers will know, as your viewer will know, that we'll be playing a fewer games without him in the future, depending on how things go. So there's been 2, isn't there? There was one where we played against the mighty Liverpool without him, played with up front, and just soaked up the pressure and played on the shoulder of the final man, which is the way Wissa plays, and won 3-1, and were quite comfortable. Pretty much the same lineup then got duffed up by West Ham in the Cup, where Wissa was terrible. So although it was with a much changed side, we have to play differently without Ivan. We have had the inevitable few injuries. It would be really nice to go through a season playing the first team. Ivan Toney, as now everybody knows, it has a good all-round game. He's not very fast, he's not very big, but he's very tough, and he doesn't take any nonsense from big centre halves. He's fantastic holding play up. He's fantastic assistant to the team when defending as well, and he pretty much takes all the chances that come his way. And he's probably the best penalty taker in the world. That technique is amazing, where he's not looking at the ball. He's just watching to see which foot the goalkeeper will put his weight on, and then spring that way, and then just slots it the other side. It's extraordinary. Brian and Mbeumo, in a game against Watford last season, did the same thing when Ivan wasn't playing. So obviously Ivan has taught Brian how to do it. And in the penalty shootout in the League Cup, which we lost, Brian did the same thing again. So we know Tony's attributes. It's interesting that one of the players that Brentford were after in the summer, Kevin Schade, was bought in the other day in the January transfer window. Brentford don't usually do business in the transfer window in January. I don't know whether that, we have got to have another number 9. We do need another number 9. He's wearing number 9. Whether or not that was rushed along because of Tony's legal problems, we don't know. A lot of people suggested that. I'm not sure. So if we don't see Ivan Toney against Bournemouth, I think we'll certainly see Schade, and he is lightning quick. As my friend Bradley Allen would say, he's got blistering pace, Bill. He's one of the fastest players in Europe, and apparently he's the fastest player in the Premier League. He had a vignette against West Ham, came on when we were chasing the game. Didn't do an awful lot, but you can see he looks the part. Balance looks good. He looks like an intelligent player. He looks like more of a traditional number 9. So if we don't see Toney, I think we're going to see Schade, and yeah, he is, my goodness me, he's fast. But again, with injuries, we're having to play 5 at the back, which I'm not a massive fan of because of injuries to key centre halves. We're playing with our 4th choice right back. None of the signings in the summer have pulled up any trees, and we paid a lot of money for them. They're very young, they're very slight. They're classic Brentford players, Damsgaard, Hickey, and Lewis Potter. So we've only seen them in very brief roles. So when we beat Liverpool, we were sitting there doing, okay, apart from Wissa, who we bought just before we joined the Premier League, the rest of the team were all our Championship players. So that core that got us up are still there, including, crucially, the goalkeeper, Raya, and our number 6, Christian Norgard, who's one of the best players in that division in the Premier League, full stop. So we are concerned about this match we're concerned about Bournemouth and Southampton. And the reason being is that when the big clubs, the traditional big clubs, the big fancy Dans come down to Brentford, they have to win. They've got their supporters, their hardcore supporters in that corner. They've got to take the game to us. We've got very good at that. We use our possession well. We'll let them have it, and we'll use our possession well. We don't soak up pressure. We don't put 10 behind the ball. We're just very good at it. That's how we beat Man City up there. When teams come and try and spoil us, show us a little bit of respect, to use that terrible bit of football shorthand, but you know what I mean. Bournemouth and Southampton will do this because they're tactically adept. So they'll know our strengths and weaknesses. They'll know that Rico Henry doesn't like one over his head at left back because he's quite short. They'll know how to rough us up. And football fans and football pundits and former BBC football commentators like me are always looking for patterns and order amongst the chaos, aren't they? Bill Shankly said that's the great thing about football. The ball is round. There's no order. It's all about trying to find space and score more goals. There isn't any order. But if you look at our results in the league this season at home, there is an order to it. Is that we've beaten the big clubs. We played really well against Tottenham and were unlucky to draw the game, thanks to Harry Kane being better than anybody on the pitch. But the two teams that have come and spoiled things and took points off us unfairly were Everton and Wolves. And they both came and roughed us up and spoiled the game. Now, that I'm not saying Bournemouth are going to do that. I'm not saying Bournemouth are an anti-football side at all. But Bournemouth, the coaches at Bournemouth and the players at Bournemouth will know, right? They'll have watched the games and they'll know a lot more than your Liverpools. Let's take Arsenal out of the equation because Arsenal beat us comfortably. They were brilliant. It was like watching an Arteta team and a Guardiola team. They were brilliant. I really hope they win the league. They were superb. The way they split the lines, the inside right channel, the inside left channel, but then did it again. Not just turning, and then, okay, now I found that little bit of space. They would play it again and again and again, and it was magnificent. And we were like, it was magnificent to watch. Bournemouth won't do that, but Bournemouth will know what they have to do to beat us. And I'm actually expecting, with a couple of mistakes at the back, we might be looking at quite a high-scoring game, actually.
It's going to be an interesting one, but... of course, Brentford have had some great managers during the years. The likes of Steve Coppell and Uwe Rosler. How does Thomas Frank compare to them?
We love Steve Coppell. I mean, it was a really shame. It was a shame that he went, and he is now a season ticket holder. So we see Steve Coppell is now watching his football at Brentford, which is lovely. Doesn't swag in. He's bought a season ticket, and it's not in the posh. There isn't like at the Vitality. There isn't. I'm going to say there's a posh bit. It's not. There's not really a posh bit, but he is in the south stand. There he is with his chums. Uwe was good. We loved Steve Coppell. It was a shame that we essentially ran out of money. Because that team wasn't too. Uwe I loved, and Uwe and I are still in touch. He's now managing in where is he now? He's in Denmark, isn't he? Now he's at Aarhus in the middle of our street now. But he's got. I think Uwe came to us, yes, with a little bit of experience, but he's got one of the most interesting backstories of any football coach that I've met, because he was one of the last players to play for the old East Germany, and he tells a story in his autobiography, because obviously he's a legend at Man City, so it was never going to be any problem with East Germans and Man City fans buying that book. But he tells a story, and then when he was playing for East Germany's under 21s, and they were playing a game in West Germany, and the coach, they were having a pee on the way back, and the coach said to him, "Should we get out of that window then?" And he didn't know whether he was joking or not. They lived quite near the western border, so they could pick up Bundesliga matches. And he said that I'm not going to criticise the East because it was really good to my family. We all had employment, but obviously the Stasi, they had oranges. That was the thing that he had that other East Germans didn't have, because he was a sportsman, was oranges. But the only time I ever saw him bristle about it was that I had a chat with him. Myself and my good lady wife Helen went on a pre-season tour that they did in Saxony, so in the old East Germany, basically so Uwe could see his mum. And they thought, the fans thought, great, there'll be matches will be near each other. We can go to these 3 games. But of course, like a typical German, 3.5 hours that way is a short journey for them. So we were on the coach and these wheat fields for miles and miles and miles. But we went to Leipzig, which is where Uwe's from, saw the Bach Cathedral. It was a lovely trip. And to the Stasi Museum, it's one of the 2 that they just left it, because Leipzig was kind of the beginnings of the of the wall coming down. There was these kind of peaceful protests, singing songs outside the Bath Cathedral, and the police were backing off. And so it was the kind of root of it. So that was the first Stasi office that was raided, and they just left it. And of course, it's just completely, it's banal, but it's also just completely ordinary. And they've just left everything with these surveillance photographs of people that were just up at that time. But the only thing that's in a case is all the cassettes that have been confiscated. So there's this big sort of like perspex box with all these like cassettes in it, really odd things like Lola Schlager from the West and Simple Minds and things like that. But when I mentioned it was really interesting to me, I'm fascinated in that period. That's I grew up when the Soviet Union was a big deal. He was a bit younger than me. And I spoke to him at the first pre-season friendly was at Boreham Wood, which seems to be a bit of a tradition of ours. And I spoke to him. He said, "Did you enjoy Leipzig?" He said, "Yeah." And he said, "We went to the Stasi office." He said, and he was completely bristled. And he went, "Why did you go there?" Because I'm really interested in the period. And he said, he said, "We all hated the Stasi." And I said, "No, I accept that, Uwe. I'm not." He said that, but what annoyed him, it turned out, about the Stasi is being a footballer. Of course, there was a file on him like that, and when it became legal that you could see your own file, 25 pages of it were missing of Uwe's, and it was the inefficiency of it that annoyed him. And I teased him about this a little later. He said, "Yeah, that was really annoying. It was like bits missing. We thought they were really put." And there was 1 in every 4 people were grassing. He was amazing. He had a temper on him, Uwe. There was a couple of lower league footballers that we got that were kind of heading towards the end of their career that he didn't like, and he made that absolutely clear. He worked very well with Mark Warburton, who was his head of recruitment. Warbs had this great idea of bringing in players from under 23 Premier League teams, because we were in the 3rd division at the time, but trying to persuade them to stay, saying it's not going anywhere at Everton, Jake, it's not going anywhere at Leeds, Adam. And we had a nice little record of kind of like signing a few of the younger players. That was much more Uwe's thing. He didn't understand these players winding their career down. He didn't like that at all. And of course, he left for a nice, juicy, big job. He left for Wigan. With all the big. I mean, just shows you how things have just completely flipped. The bright lights of Wigan, and then the bright lights of Leeds. And he's had a decent career since. Actually, he's had a couple of. He's been sacked a couple of times, but he tends to run his contract down. And his boys, because he's so enamoured of Manchester City, his boys are called Tony and Colin. Which is one of them is a footballer who plays. I think he plays in Holland. Not at a very high standard. They're still quite. They were both in the kind of under 8s at Man City, but they're called Tony and Colin. So I ask you, Craig Beasley, as a football fan,
yeah,
Man City legend Uwe Rosler, the kind of hero that you have at a football club who was good when your team were terrible. That's why he's a cult figure there, because he scored goals under Alan Ball for the 3rd division Man City team. Why, knowing what you do about Man City, why are Uwe Rosler's boys called Tony and Colin?
Ooh.
Colin's a bit easier. Colin Todd.
Colin Todd, yep.
And
Colin...
Tony Book. And we're not talking like, and what's so lovely about that is that 2 more arcane names you couldn't possibly think. Colin is the Scottish version of Nicholas. Tony, a diminutive of Anthony, but they're called Tony and Colin. That's just beautiful. But no, but Brentford, what Brentford have, to a certain degree, Bournemouth have it at the moment as well. What Brentford have is a succession plan. If Brentford lose their manager, there's someone usually working at the club who will replace them. And imagine that, a football club with a succession plan. So Thomas Frank, despite the fact that he appeared to be Dean Smith's number 3, was essentially the guy that was brought in as a number 2 with all of his professorial expertise working for the Danish FA. But if Dean Smith ever left, Thomas was going to be his replacement. Is there somebody working at the club now that if should Thomas ever leave would become the manager? Yes, there is. Though Thomas has been given what we football fans call a contract extension, but what anybody else would call a pay rise. Yeah. So I don't think he's going anywhere. I think probably the only place he would go would probably be to manage Denmark, but he'd have to take a pay cut to do it.
Well, exactly, exactly. And of course, the Premier League, the best league in the world. And it's
So,
crazy to think we're in it, really, isn't it?
I think so. And I think the Bournemouth, with all due respect to you and
Mm.
to us, I think the Bournemouth and the Brentfords, I think the fact that there can be some unpredictable results is actually good for the brand. Leicester City winning the league was good for the brand. Whether that's good for football, or I don't know. Whether it's good for fans, I don't know. But it's good for the brand that it is a little bit unpredictable. We all know that, there's only a handful, 3, 1, 2 clubs are going to win everything at the end of the day. But when it comes to watching games in those emerging markets, China and Singapore and the United States and all the rest of it, that's probably why it's the best league in the world, and that's why it's the richest league in the world, and that's why being promoted into the Premier League is so valuable, because it's being shown on television. The television rights to it are extraordinary, because as I said earlier, what you can sell against it, and I think it's fantastic for English football that Bournemouth and Brentford and this season Fulham are in the Premier League, and you can see how quickly it can go wrong at Sheffield Wednesday, Sheffield United, Middlesbrough, and clubs like that. So, are Bournemouth going to stay up? That's my question to you, because it's all looking a little bit dicey from the outside at the moment.
I think we will do. And I think it'll be down to the new owner that's come in. He
Right,
is
yeah.
determined. And he's already come out and said, we're not going to get relegated. There's already the rumour. We'd love this to happen. It's come out today. Arnaut Danjuma
Right.
is potentially coming back to the
Wow.
club.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that would be an amazing sign. In fact, what's quite funny with this, Billy, is I made a video suggesting why it would be good for us to go back into for him
Yeah, I saw that.
an hour
Yeah.
and a half. Yeah, an
Yeah.
hour and a half before it actually
Yeah.
happens. So
I saw that. I saw that when I was checking you out, checking your bona fides out. Yeah. And also your question still remains: is that what would his role in the team be?
I think personally, I think he'll be able to walk into the team. I think
Okay.
probably on the right hand side of midfield. Um, I don't think we could really shift Jaden Anthony and Jordan Zamora. They've been fantastic so far this season. So I reckon, although it's probably not his desired position, he played very well on the left hand side when he was here last. He can do it on the right,
Okay.
especially considering there is that injury to Tavernier as well. So, I'm really, really excited about
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
opportunity.
that's what you want. You want heroes, and season ticket holders. It's the one of the few times that working class people can have people working for them. Even though obviously it's not our money that pays their wages anymore. But that's what I love. That's what I love about it. They're ours, and that connection, as you'll see, especially when Brentford win the match, between the fans and um, the management and the team, is amazing. Always applauding all 4 sides of the ground and all the rest of it. That's so important. And of course, that's something you just can't do at those enormo bowls like Tottenham. What have you been to the Have you been to the bigger grounds? Your Man
Um,
Uniteds and your Tottenhams.
I haven't been to the new Tottenham one. I've been to Manchester
Oh,
United. I've been to some
okay.
grounds like that. Liverpool went
Yeah, so I've
earlier
not
on
been.
this season.
Yeah, wow. I've not been to Liverpool. What's it like? That's one of the few I've
Um,
not been to.
an amazing stadium. You can feel the atmosphere and the history around it. Um, wasn't particularly a very nice day because we got beat 9-0. So
Oh yeah, that was that one, was it?
yes,
Oh,
it's that one.
we'll support you evermore. Never stop singing after the seventh.
Well, to be honest, to be fair to us, we did keep trying to, sing our hearts out, but
No, as you bloody well should for the chat. Yeah, no, that's one of the because I think it's something like 86 grounds I've been to working following
mhm,
Brentford across all the divisions. But there's obviously some of the bigger ones that I didn't get to do,
mhm.
because they're commentary games. It's become such a big story at BBC Radio London. I've been to Old Trafford, but not to see us play. But Liverpool's the one.
Yeah.
Liverpool's the absolute one that I'm absolutely desperate to go to. It may be that we're playing them the same weekend as the Eurovision Song Contest, so it might be a bit might be a bit busy. I'm
Yeah.
desperate to get to that one. And Accrington, Morecambe, and Cambridge are the only lower league ones.
Mhm.
obviously not counting teams that have come up since.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I can probably do without Accrington, Morecambe and Cambridge, but I would very much like to go and see Brentford play at Liverpool. That would be amazing.
Well, hopefully you get a better result than we did.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah,
It's not hard, is it? Really? Let's
I
be
think that. Well, they are, we've upset them, haven't we? We've upset Jurgen by beating them and beating them comfortably.
Mhm. Yep, you did. You did. Um, One thing about the transfer policy as well, and of course we're in January, is Brentford have always been very sensible in the transfer market. You don't spend extortionate amounts, but the players you bring in, like Damsgaard, are
Yeah.
fantastic and walk into that side.
Okay, there's a little bit. Okay, there's a little bit. No one's listening to us. So it's only Bournemouth fans that are listening, right? There's a little bit that it is a little bit of a myth because we've had a really good success rate with players that we've brought in the Matthew Benham period, right? So, firstly, yes, we've had a terrific success with our recruitment, and that's partly or wholly, mostly down to the fact that when, and it's usually a man, isn't it, or a conglomerate of men, when a rich man buys a football club, they bring with them the experience that made them their millions and billions, but it's hardly ever relevant to running a football club, right? So, whereas Matthew Benham, because of what he did for a living, trying to beat the bookies, being a bookmaker himself, investing in another football club, FC Midtjylland, which he'd already done, he had 150 people watching every match that was going on in Europe and picking up statistics to help beat the bookies. And Smart Odds, which has now moved to Ireland. So he came into the football club with a huge amount of relevant experience, and that has helped the recruitment. We've tried a few different things. If things don't work, there's not a one way of doing it. We've tried a few different things. Mark Warburton wanted to join the academy system. He actually wanted to become a grade 2 academy. That was quickly, so we could continue this relationship with other academicians and sign them, which worked quite well for him. And that was scrapped soon after he left because it's just so much money. So we've gone down the B team route. The late Robert Rowan, lovely guy, died a few years ago, bought that in from Celtic. We've done that. So we've got players that come in from the B team. We've signed players that have been disasters. It's just that we've managed to keep it quiet. £6 million, our record signing, Joel Valencia. Anybody ever heard of him? No, just keep that quiet. He was terrible. It does happen. We also bring in one of the most old-fashioned ways of recruiting players, of course, is mate of the manager, isn't it? Oh, yeah, lad that I work with, he'll do a job for us. Jensen and Norgard are those players because Thomas managed the Danish, I think it's something like under 10s, under 12s, under 14s, under 16s, under 19s. So he knows a lot of Danish players and a lot of people in Danish football. Norgard and Jensen had been sold by their Danish teams. One to, I can't remember which way round it was, Norgard to Fiorentina, Jensen to Celta Vigo, and they hadn't played. They were too young. It just didn't work. Jensen wasn't tough enough for the Spanish league. Norgard wasn't being played, so he saved them, and they've been brilliant for us. And they were Shrubben Satan because they weren't playing. So we do things in all the ways. There's no one Brentford way of doing it. Yes, we use statistical analysis, but everybody does. We have got a very good negotiator in our first 2 directors of football. One has now left for Southampton because he brokered the deal for the new owners, who's the guy that persuaded Matthew to get involved in Midtjylland in the first place. But we got this guy, Phil Giles, who's a mathematician, a banker who used to work for Matthew. He's our negotiation guy, and he's very well respected. And there's certain clubs and certain people and certain agents that we don't deal with. Right, we just do not deal with it. I'll tell you when we finish this. Who are the 2 clubs we just do not deal with? And Phil's very open about that. Yes, that was something that was told to me off the record, but he's very open about our transfer policy. And thirdly, this season or in the summer, we did the spending money. What are Brentford going to do now? They've got money to spend. Now they can go after players that are in the 20 to 25 million bracket. Now what's going to happen? Are things going to improve? No, they haven't, because you need a year. Mikkel Damsgaard, who keeps our own player Jensen out of the Danish team, is the absolute star. He looks really lightweight. He looks really lost in a game. He's not starting games. He will get better, but that's a gamble. Hickey got injured really quickly as a player that a lot of people are after, and a right back. He was absolutely terrible against Newcastle. He keeps getting fooled by people. Arsenal game, he can get tricked into going after the ball because he's not played enough games. Lewis Potter, again, Lewis Potter was the main man at Hull. So we have to, he's the sort of guy that a team is built around. But we did that with other players. Ben Rama came to us as the player that we were supposed to build the team around. And of course, we don't build the team around anybody. Ivan Toney is our main man, and he will be for a little while longer, hopefully. So it can go, at the moment, as I said earlier, the team that beat Liverpool were 10 of our Championship players. So it does look good from the outside, right? But Brentford have been a little bit fortunate, perhaps, with it going right, but it doesn't always go right. And then finally, the other thing we seem to be doing in the case of Damsgaard and in the case of our new signing Sharda is that we bring in a player who a lot of people have been after the previous season, but then has got injured. So the Sharda, are we going to spend the rest of the season trying to get him fit again? Damsgaard, we could have sold him for 40 million to Tottenham. He has this abdominal injury. So we tend to, Ahier, who we were after for ages from Scotland, from Celtic, they've all come to us with injuries, and then we've got to get them fit. Ahier, unfortunately, has spent a little bit of time out of the team. Charlie Good, the League Two Player of the Season for Northampton, on paper, an absolute perfect signing for us in Champions, hardly played. So there is a few, we haven't gone completely crazy like our former friend Andy Scott at Nottingham Forest and signed absolutely everybody. We tend to have a good track record of signing players, but now, of course, people want money off of us. Kevin Sharda, I don't know whether the deal involves add-ons, because we don't tend to do that. But it probably is. It probably does do with that. I mean, that's going to be north of 25 million quid. And that's an extraordinary amount of money for Brentford. So if you're talking about all Brentford pick-up bargains, Ayer, Hickey, Lewis Potter, Sharda, Damsgaard, that's almost £100 million.
Mm-hmm. And also you've got Brentford B as well, which is the equivalent of academy, but it isn't. But you've also signed Romeo Beckham.
Yeah, the B team, like I said earlier, the B team was the idea was taken from Scotland, where Rangers and Celtic both have B teams, and of course they do in Spain as well, don't they? And other countries have. I think Poland does as well, where B teams, Barcelona too, they're allowed to play in the pyramid. So the thing about the B team, it's not an academy team. It's not linked with the academy system. But thanks to Rob Rowan's charm, sadly no longer with us, like I say, and the fact that we always have a serious coach, this one is Neil McFarlane, they are allowed to take part in tournaments. So they're in the Premier League Cup, where they are going to win their section and go and play bigger sides. So they play Aston Villa at under 21s, Blackburn Rovers, that kind of sort of like level 2 academies. We're allowed to play in the Premier League Cup, which we usually do very well in. But also, rather cleverly, the B team, obviously Brentford are members of the Middlesex and Surrey and London Football Association and play in all of their cups. So we play in the Middlesex Senior Cup and the London Senior Cup, where we play sort of teams from levels 8, 7 and 6 as it goes up, and have won it a couple of times. So we are playing established teams. They are playing men's football. They tend to be 18, 19, 20. Yeah. Under Premier League rules, as I don't need to tell you, starting next season, we do have to now have an academy. Now, the point of scrapping the academy was there was no point in us trying to get local lads. Chelsea are going to get them, right? And London, there's a kid who lives near Chiswick who plays for Brighton, who was scouted by Brighton. It's pointless us trying to get involved in the academy system, but we've got to. So we're sort of doing this kind of elliptical academy where we're having it as a junior team and under 18s team, 16 and 17-year-olds. So they played some games this season, and it's all going to be ultra local schools. So I don't know how on earth the Brentford Academy are going to get on next season. I foresee kind of 40-0 defeats. But the B team, they have to have, and COVID, of course, made this really difficult. The idea is that they have a 38-game season. Romeo Beckham has been signed. He was, those of us, ITKs, those of us in the know, knew that he was training with the team in the off season because he plays for the B team at Inter Miami, the club his father owns, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
And he came to us to get match fitness. That was the idea. Having said that, now they've obviously decided that he's good enough to play. So they needed to sign him with as little circus as possible. His father was present in London, so they did one photograph. They didn't make a big deal of it. They had one photograph with him, with his dad signing, with him signing. He played, as you probably know, because it's been a big story at BBC London, certainly. And I'm like going, stop it! We've all heard the wherefore out there, Romeo. We've all heard that joke. He played at Erith in a London Senior Cup game a couple of nights ago, and his father was there. Paid his £10 to get in, apparently. I had to make a bit of an escape once word had got round that he was playing. It put 400 on the gate, apparently. There was 500 people there. He plays, I think it's tonight. Is it tonight? This week. They've got a dead rubber against Villa in the Premier League Cup, which he'll be involved in, I think. So I think the other thing that probably David understands is that not only is the B team a good way of getting games without there being that sort of, you know, playing academy matches on plastic pitches like he has been doing. He'll have to play at Erith, he'll have to play at Dulwich Hamlet, he'll have to be kicked up in the air by Hanwell Town, and it'll be good for him. I think also David understands that Brentford's press team will deal with it properly, because there is going to be a little bit of a circus. He did all right. I watched the stream of it. He did all right, Romeo. He came on as a late substitute, hit the bar with a header. He's a right-sided player who puts in a curling cross. So yeah, it's just also more importantly, Kevin Lisby, Charlton legend. He plays for the B. His son, Kyrese, plays for the B team. He came on and scored 2 goals. We're very fond of the B team. Fans go and see. You know, I've been to the finals. But Brexit's going to make things a little bit difficult with getting work permits and stuff. You know, you have to be in an established international, so there'll be more homegrown players, I think, playing for the B team. And I don't know whether, presumably, Romeo Beckham does count as homegrown because he's got a British passport, even though he's only ever played in the States. But yeah, it's not a publicity stunt. It's not a big circus and stuff. He'll have to fight his way into the team like anybody else.
Exactly. Well, of course, Brentford 9th in the league. Europe.
Not bad. Yeah, that'd be nice. I think that the most important thing is obviously surviving, like it is for you. And I think that if Brentford were to let's not have a massive struggle. Let's not start last season. Let's not have any stress. But if Brentford were to only just stay up, that would be progress for me. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of most of the older fans I know, because that would be 2 seasons as a Premier League team, and that's progress. You know, so, and you know, in the words of the late great Gianluca Vialli, you don't lose, you either win or you learn, and which is a phrase that Thomas is keen on using. So there's strength in depth when it comes to these young players for another crack at it next season. Europe would be amazing. I don't think we're good enough, and unless we get everybody fit. We've got everybody fit. We've got these 3 young lads that we've signed, show the potential that got them that big money move to Brentford, even as substitutes. If we can just keep everybody, if we just can get through the rest of the season without another flipping injury crisis, we're in the middle of the little bit one again, as we were last season a couple of times. It's the same for everybody, I know. I think that's why Potter will be given a little bit of time at Chelsea, you know, at the time of recording, of course, playing Fulham, at work, the big story of the season. And they were great when they beat us. It's the only game this season I've actually worked at. I did the post match at it because it was a commentary game, and obviously to London, and we did it live, which was quite good fun. So Fulham were great, and I hope they do well, even though I hate them. But I don't hate them. I don't really. I don't. It's silly, you know. I'm supposed to hate them because I don't hate them. But Fulham are the story of this season. We're not. We've just got. There's just been a few spotlights on us because of these terrific games against Liverpool and Man City. But we need to learn how to scrap. But beating. If we can win against Bournemouth and Southampton, that will get the monkey off my back a little bit about getting involved in these scraps. If we can do that, if we can add that to our game, then the running's probably a little bit more difficult than the first half of the season, though. We've got to play some of the big sides, but that shouldn't faze us. We've shown that we can play well against them. It would be amazing. We did play in the. There was some sort of like Watney's Red Barrel tournament that we played in Europe in the 80s, which I didn't go to. So we have played in Europe. Palermo, I think we went to in Sicily, something like that. Turin, I can't remember now. But God, yeah, it'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah,
It'd be amazing. Plenty would go.
Oh, it's something we dream of. Can you imagine Brentford versus Barcelona, Bournemouth versus Madrid?
Completely. We're well respected amongst, but everybody knows who we are now in European football, and also there was a survey done recently about season ticket holders and where they live, and in the Premier League, we're by far and away the most local club. 83% of our season ticket holders live within 7 miles of the ground. And that's not me. I live 10 miles away. So even then, we sort of expand that out to people like me and Rich, it's probably well over 90% of us live within 10 miles of ground. So the fact that we would then all go en masse to Barcelona, totally bring it on. But we're going to need those. We're going to need a bigger squad, aren't we, if we do that, because we've got quite a small one.
Do you know what? It would be a dream. Going to Madrid. I don't care which one, Atletico or Real, or
Totally. Well, it's reward if Bournemouth, when it happens to Bournemouth, which I'm sure it will. When it happens to Bournemouth and when it happens to us, which I'm sure it will be a reward. It'll be a reward for the players' efforts getting to that whatever position that is in the league. It will be a reward for the management and the owner for getting to that position in the league against all the odds, and it'll be a reward for the fans. And it will be well deserved. Difficult, isn't it?
And I think it would be more special for us than one of those top teams fans, who have always been there, because look at where we was, Carlisle away.
Yeah. No, that must be terrible for Bournemouth fans. I've realised why you've picked that one. That's actually one of the ones that I really miss. I loved Carlisle away. I love the fact that the two guys that did the music, that's presumably they still do. It's easy to get to from London, Carlisle, actually, because it's just Euston. It's straight there. And it's a really nice walk through that Edwardian bit, and it's got a great statue, isn't it, Carl? But I love the fact that the two guys that do the music, I hope they still do. One is like full on late 70s, early 80s new wave of British heavy metal, and the other one is hardcore Northern Soul. So you get this sort of like, you get Whitesnake followed by the Foundations. It's brilliant. I really like Carlisle. Really strange grounds. On those old, new, old grounds. Now, Carlisle's one of the ones I really miss. But they played in the first division when I was a lad in their Ajax-inspired kit, one season. So yeah, hopefully Carlisle can join us in the Premier League at some point. Now I miss Carlisle. You must be the same for you. What grounds do you miss? Torquay. You used to love going there.
Yeah, places, Gillingham. Gillingham is, an atmosphere. There's always,
especially in the rain, as an away fan.
Exactly. Pompey, Park down here, always a nice trip. But of course, there's grounds as well that have gone now, like Griffin Park, that hold so many memories throughout those years of that journey, really.
Yeah, no, I remember talking to when we played Man City in that one. I think it was one season where we were in the same division as they were. I was talking to some fans who saying this is more fun being down in the third division, but of course it's not for us. It's not for Bournemouth and Brentford fans because we've done it. We've spent so much time sort of worrying and watching teams struggle and watching players leave and managers leave and owners being dubious and all the rest of it, that we're really enjoying and embracing this. And like I said earlier, it's because that neither club really has a history, so we can make our history now. And I think we're not encumbered by it. I remember going back to Carlisle. I remember we were at Carlisle. I was at Carlisle the first time that the new stadium was mooted with the then board, which had a couple of fans, so it's still got one fan rep on the station with them. So, oh, Billy, if we get this new ground, who would you? We're just discussing this. Who would you have as a statue? And I said, no one. There isn't anybody. We were a good team in the late 30s. The manager then is our big, sort of legendary figure. But I mean, that was 80 odd years ago. So let's not do that. Let's not be encumbered by, you go to Arsenal and there's like statues of everything that's ever happened to them. It's like looking back. Do you go to Tottenham? The inside of the ground, the history of the club. Yes, it's rich and you can feel it and all the rest of it, but it doesn't make any difference to the match that you're just about to see. So it was later. I remember, obviously there's no room for a statue. Well, there could be, but yeah, but it was like, yeah, no, that's a good point. We don't, and it's the same. We can make. It's the same with Bournemouth. We can make our history now, and even if it's just 2 or 3 seasons where we just annoy the big boys. But yeah, a European jaunt would certainly create a bit of modern history.
Most definitely. I can't wait. I can't wait for that, Billy.
Yeah, well, it'll happen. It'll happen if they're well run. If they're well run clubs, that's the future of association football in this country. It's going to be the well run clubs, because the sort of like multi-billionaires that are off with their dirty money and all the rest of it. The clubs I'm talking about, that are going to become European super clubs. Let them clear off to their European Super League or whatever. Right, okay. It's going to be the well-run clubs that are going to be the future of football. Wenger talked about this, even though he blotted his copybook during the World Cup. But Wenger talked about this. And if Bournemouth can become a well-run club where they don't go mad, if Brentford can stay being a well-run club that don't go mad and don't get into loads of debt, and Matthew can hold on in there, and we don't know. It's the well-run clubs that will be the future of the game. We were talking about this at work today. Thursday is Rugby Union Day on the sports programme, and of course Rugby Union is in massive crisis because of COVID. They're talking about I don't take any interest in it at all, apart from listening to that sort of 3/4 of an hour. And players are going to clear off to France apparently, and you could see that massive collapse at the bottom of the association game because of the people are still going to be paying off their debts from COVID. So if Bournemouth's new ownership can turn Bournemouth into a well-run club, there is absolutely no reason why Bournemouth can't be regulars in Europe. Let's just run things sensibly.
Yes, yeah, definitely,
sustainably.
And I think eventually, and this is a sad mute point actually, I think one day, I think Bill Foley is going to be looking at moving us out of Dean Court, which we love.
Yeah, but it's gonna have to be done. You need it as an asset. Yeah. Is Dean Court, is the Vitality an asset? No, it isn't. But of course, it's another case. Of course, it's where. But the most crucial, if we did learn, as I said earlier, if we did learn anything from our successful move, I think it has been a successful move, is consultation with the fans. Yeah. Consultation with the fans about public transport, how they're going to get there. It's all very well Forest Green Rovers saying we're going to build a wooden stadium. I mean, you can't get to their current one via public transport, and there'll have to be a park and ride off the M5. No one's been. It's just all about the owner and his vision. It needs to be done in consultation with the customers, with the people that are going to turn up to this new ground, and they're going to have to buy into a complete change of culture of how to get there, where they're going to park their bike, how they're going to get there, how they're going to drive. Is there going to be disabled places? These things in our case, how we're going to cross the A4 without getting killed. All of these things need to be discussed. And I think you're right. And I think it's got to be done, but it's got to be done slowly, and it's got to be done in consultation with the fans. And you're going to have to stay in the Premier League to pay for it.
Definitely. Well, before we get on to predictions, a prediction that might mean that Brentford edge a little bit closer to that European dream, or we edge a little bit further away, I should say, from the drop zone. I do want to give you time just to tell everybody about where they can find the album and more about you, Billy. I'm going to make.
I can't possibly talk about my album. My album. You mean my album? Where have you got my album? It's you can go to my Linktree, linktree.com/Billy Reeves OK. I'm on the socials, Billy Reeves OK on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm putting a record out, and it's brilliant. Described as I won't bore you. But in fact, shall I read out some of what the critics have been saying? It says here, Rock and Reel magazine Ambitious and accomplished, tender beauty, deliciously concise plot, unpredictable arrangement twists. Uncut magazine, luxurious laments, nice bit of alliteration, dominated by a morose beauty. Classic pop magazine described me as being a cross between Ivor Cutler fronting Saint Etienne with a panache and wide-eyed love of both pop and humanity. The album's called Nostalgia of the Future. If you like your vinyl, you can pick it up in red or pink from my label Last Night from Glasgow.
Excellent. Well, all
Thanks.
the links are, that's all right, no problem at all, Billy. The description has got the link in there as well. So
Thanks,
if you're on a computer, go on there
Thanks,
and go and
Mr.
order yourself
Beasley.
a copy. That's
Thanks,
all
Mr.
right,
Beasley.
no problem. Well, we've got to predict this game as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I always seem to get this wrong. Believe it or not, I thought we might get a good result against Liverpool. We got thrashed 9-0. Then I think it was Leicester. I turned around and said, I don't feel this game. Then we won. So, and then,
if you could predict the outcome of football matches, you'd be a rich man like Matthew Benham, and you could buy yourself a football. Though he's not that rich, but you could buy yourself a football club. You know, that's the beauty. Go on then. Put the tin hat on it.
I would say, realistically, we need a win, but realistically, I would be happy with a draw. I wouldn't be surprised if we get beat.
Not many clubs come away from New Griffin Park with all 3 points. Only Arsenal have done it this season. Although we've lost in the League Cup to Gillingham and we lost in the FA Cup to West Ham with a depleted team. Look at those games. They're the games. The Everton and Wolves games are the games where teams came down and they got involved. Right? And that's what Bournemouth will do. I think that means it's a high-scoring game. Personally, I think we'll take it as we always do because we'll play on the front foot. Bournemouth will try and stop us doing that, especially if we're going to play 5 at the back again, which I think we will. They'll know that they've got to stop the wing back. They know they've got to stop us scoring first because we're good at defending a lead. But I see we're due. I think we're due with the only 2 games, and I was at both of them where we've sort of like fallen over each other and played it out and given the ball away, and were Newcastle and Villa. When Villa was a really weird one, I don't know what happened there, but Newcastle, we were terrible, absolutely terrible. And we are kind of due one, I think. And unless Ivan Toney is there, Norgard's fully fit, Aher is fully fit, we are kind of due. We're due a couple of sort of like cock-ups at the back, for want of a better term. But we will always score goals. So I actually think this is going to be a very high-scoring game, which will be won by Brentford 5-2.
5-2. Wow. I can't remember the last time we had one of them, but we had a 4-3 against Liverpool a little while back. Of course, that was about 4 years ago now. Before they went and won the league, but I'm going to go with a draw, and I'll go for 2-2. I'll probably be a little bit more conservative with that.
That's a high scoring game.
Yeah,
these days, isn't it? Yeah. No, we score a lot of goals at home, but we're due. We can be beaten. And Bournemouth are. These are the 2 games that we're worried about. That Bournemouth will get it right and will understand how to play us, to spoil it. Not a scrap, but you know what I mean. And with all due respect to Bournemouth, they'll come and stop us, right? Because they know that they've got to. They won't come and play around us. And Southampton, you always thought that Nathan Jones was going to get it right at some point. They may have hit some form now. These are 2 games that we're worried about. They're not going to be season defining for us. But if we win them both, then they may be.
Well, focus on beating that lot down the M27 in a couple of weeks' time, and take it easier on us on Saturday in front of the cameras.
We do exactly the same with QPR. We never mention them by name. The lot from W12. Yeah. No, he's not going to. He's not doing it for the good reason. I don't like him, Nathan Jones. Don't like him at all. But there is a connection between us and them. You just thought they'd made a massive mistake by getting rid of Hasenhüttl. But no, they will get. No, I'm worried. I'm worried about these 2 games. I must admit. But then I do need to learn to turn up to games and think. I did at Liverpool actually. At Liverpool, I sort of swanned on they were going to beat. They're going to beat them today, and I must must remember that we're a Premier League club. I must remember that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Billy. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thanks
All
for
the
having
very
me.
best. Not a problem at all. Our pleasure. All the very best for the gig in
No,
week's time.
I'll be there. I'll be there supporting. I won't be playing. But yeah, no, I'm very fond of Bournemouth. As you know, we holidayed at the Tralee Hotel, which I understand is still there, every year during the 70s, because my parents were aspirational. And every time I hear chirpy, chirpy, cheep, cheep, I always remember the house band at the Tralee Hotel, the Furnicular Railway, Boscombe Pier. But yeah, I hope we give you a damn good hiding on Saturday.
Well, all the very best for the rest of the season. Of course,
Thanks, man.
after Saturday.
Yeah, and
Definitely,
after Saturday.
definitely beat that lot down the road. Beat that lot down the road for us. We need that. Let's be honest. They beat Man City, and you beat Man City, so you can beat them.
It's mad, isn't it? Brilliant. It's mad but brilliant.
But all the very best as well with the records and also the album. And the link is below. And everybody, make sure you buy a copy.
It's there's not very many of them, so it'll be worth a fortune in years to come.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure, Billy, and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for joining me on this show. Please do remember to hit the like, the subscribe, the bell button below to be alerted to any new videos we do. Please do order Billy's album because it is fantastic. So please do click on there and order yourself a copy. Do check out as well all of our previous videos. We was discussing what we do next, of course, the other day. The Arnaut Danjuma video, of course, which I predicted, is that the right thing to say, that we was going to go in for him. We've also got interviews as well with Trevor Watkins and Eddie Mitchell, all those days, like Billy was saying, from those League Two days all the way forwards to the Premier League. And also previous players, of course, Big Fletch, the man that scored the goal, Steve Cook, the man that got us here, and of course Charlie Daniels, who did it with him. So please do remember to subscribe to the channel and like and share. We will be back with another show very, very soon, so do keep your eyes peeled. But until the next one, up the cherries, and we'll see you then. Thank you for joining us.